All right, Council. We are going to call the meeting to order. I'll remind everyone to please disclose of any pecuniary interest at the appropriate time. And is Dr. Renaday with us this morning?
Dr. Renaday should be joining us here any minute.
Okay, thank you. There he is. Welcome, Dr. Renaday. Thank you for joining us this morning. You're muted right now. I don't know. There you go. I'm going to ask you to turn it up.
Oh. Okay, I'm at 100.
You're good.
Okay, good. I didn't know if you had something else to cover. Is it? Are you?
Nope, we're going to go right to you.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have a very short update today. So the first is to just update you on cases that we've had. So as of today, we're reporting a total of 392 cases. Had a little blip there, and so we've done the contact tracing and investigation. It's mostly wrapped up, and we've been isolating all of the close contacts. But the next thing is connected to it, which is what's going on everywhere else, right? So we started by seeing more and more cases in the GTA. You're starting to now see more and more cases in surrounding other metropolitan areas, so London, Windsor, etc. And you're seeing them move stages through the provincial response framework from green to yellow. I think that we have to expect that we will also start to see more cases just because that's what's happening everywhere. It's happening around the world, and it's happening in every place that has more and more places open for people to do things in. The response framework has now been out for maybe a week and a half, not very long, right? And very shortly after it was released, the government changed the thresholds, brought them down a little bit in response to some concerns that maybe the thresholds were set a little bit too high and would wait too long before moving communities into the next categories. Every category has successive pieces of restriction added to it. It goes from green to yellow to orangey, darky yellow to red, and we're in green, but you'll notice that London and Windsor had been in green, they're moving into the yellow, etc. Right? So there's lots of discussions at the province about a few things. One, are the thresholds set at the right place? Two, are the restrictions in the categories appropriate, right? Are they going to actually help? Because what you want to do is your measures at yellow, you want them to be enough so that communities don't have to go into the red. It's not intended to be just this natural progression. It's intended to be that the measures are such that they can help to either keep you there or bring you back into the next phase. So because it's a new framework and because any of these changes would take at least 2 weeks to decide whether or not they're working, we really, I think we have to work through this implementation sort of collectively as a province, right? To see, are the thresholds right and are the restrictions right? But that's an ongoing conversation and everyone will continue to have that as we go forward. So cases, the response framework, and then finally, I wanted to give you an update on vaccines. You're all likely aware of this, but just for your information, there have been 2 vaccine candidates that have demonstrated in the early indicators of efficiency or highly effective vaccines, over 90%. That is very, very encouraging for several reasons. One, we've never had vaccines to any virus in the coronavirus family before. So it's very encouraging that we've been able to do that. 2, when you bring a vaccine from the clinical trials out into the field, the effectiveness generally goes lower than what you found in the clinical trials. And so if we're starting at over 90%, that's good because we'll go down from there instead of starting at something like 60, 70%, right? So these are very, very encouraging and reassuring. I think it's important to remember that when you factor in the finalizing of the trial, the approval process through the regulatory agency, the manufacturing, the distribution planning, and then the implementation of actually giving vaccines, we're probably talking the middle of next year, I think is a reasonable estimate. Some people are saying we might have doses as early as, very early next year, but I'm not sure about that. I think it's probably more realistic to say the middle of next year, which is why it's really important to continue focusing on all of the public health measures, right? Physical distancing is so critical, reducing non-essential social interactions, and keeping an eye on what's going on in other places so that if we need to set different kinds of restrictions through the thresholds, then we'll move into those areas. And I think those decisions are being made on a weekly basis, given indicators from the previous week. So I think I'll leave it there. Those are the three things that I wanted to cover with you folks.
Okay, we'd like to open it up to any questions for Dr. Renaday. Councillor Hand.
I had a question about, so when early on a while ago, when Toronto and some of those areas got put into the, on the old system, into the, lockdown more, we didn't see any change in numbers, right? When you say it takes about 2 weeks for things to happen, but I don't remember seeing any improvement in the numbers. So I just wonder why.
Yeah,
that's discouraging.
So I think I just want to clarify that with you. Are you talking about back in the first wave, or are you talking about more recently?
More recently, when they went into the restricted period. I mean, before we went to the color coding, they went into the restrictions like Peel and Toronto and Ottawa.
I believe they called it a modified stage 2.
Right, but then I didn't so in 2 weeks, when you do something like that, you should see some benefit, but it didn't seem like there was any change.
Yeah,
any betterment.
Sure. So there was a little bit in Ottawa. It seems like Ottawa did do, there was some impact there. Less so, you're right, in Peel and Toronto and the GTA, right? And I think you have to really ask yourself why that is. There's probably 2 reasons. One is that it's possible that the restrictions are not enough, right? They're not broad enough. They really focused on a couple of categories like indoor dining and something else, I think. And so bars, right? So it's possible that it's not enough. The second possibility, and I think it's actually both that are working at play here, which is that transmission is happening outside of those settings. People are gathering together socially. People are gathering together in places that are either unregulated or not able to be regulated. And so you're getting transmission from both of those, from that setting, as well as the fact that it's possible that the restrictions were not applied broadly enough. So I think it's a bit of both.
Thank you.
Deputy Warden Marriott, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair Rumbouts. To you, Dr. Renaday, is there any worry in the health community that if the virus mutates, that the work they've done on the vaccines will not be as effective?
So thank you. Good question. At this time, I don't believe so, and I'll tell you why. There is evidence that there are different mutations or strains of this vaccine. So far, they are not really affecting the part of the vaccine that allows it to attach to your body and enter your cells, right? That's the part that's actually being targeted by the efforts to make a vaccine. And in fact, it's possible that if the vaccine mutated such that part changed, it may not even work as effectively. So the virus wouldn't even be as effective at infecting people, right? So the little protein on the virus that helps it get into your cells is the target of most or all of the vaccines. And it's unlikely that strain changes, minor changes or mutations in the virus will affect that protein. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Stark?
Yes, Dr. Renaday, 2 things happened yesterday. In Massachusetts, the mayor of Boston made an announcement that university students who are returning to their respective homes are being instructed not to come back to Boston to resume their studies after the Thanksgiving break. And then subsequent to that, the education minister in Ontario, Minister Lecce, made an announcement that a prospective option may be to extend the Christmas vacation for Ontario students. My question is, does it appear to be reasonable to assume that we are going to go into a longer shutdown period commencing with the Christmas school break? And would that be wise?
Okay, good question. I think it's reasonable to assume that if the numbers continue in the direction that they are, that a province-wide restriction would come into effect, and that a time when that might come into effect would be around the time when you expect more and more people to gather anyway. Like over the winter, Christmas holidays, etc. Right? So it's very possible that that would happen. I can't really say for sure whether it would or not, again, because those are, from my understanding, those are decisions that Cabinet is sort of reviewing and making. And so, but yeah, I think that you could reasonably say if the cases keep going up the way they're going, that there could be further province-wide restrictions. As to whether it's a good idea, I think the only thing that I can tell you is, apart from the fact that we know that those restrictions have negative consequences in and of themselves that we've already talked about here. The other side of that is, so far, that seems to be the most effective or only thing in the toolbox that we've seen make a real difference in terms of numbers. So that's probably what they're going to have to weigh.
Thank you. The minister and the Ontario Minister Lecce seemed to suggest that he almost was floating a trial balloon, I thought, in terms of what the public was going to, how the public was going to react. And of course, we don't know what that is as of yet, but certainly I would think a controversial move. Thank you very much for your comments.
Councillor Bird, with all due respect, it's only committee members that are allowed to comment during the committee meeting.
I understood that I cannot vote, but I can make comments and ask questions. I know I can't vote, but I think I have a right to ask questions or make comments. Stefan, if you're there, could you please confirm that again for me?
No, the control of the meeting really rests with the chair. So the chair can control the meeting and accept other members of the public and or other councillors who are not members of this committee to speak and or not ask questions. So it's really within the chair's prerogative to control this meeting.
Normally, I wouldn't allow questions from the general public. However, as you are a councillor on County Council, I will allow one question.
Well, thank you. I have one question for Dr. Renaday, but I have a comment later on. And if it wasn't really important, I wouldn't have joined the meeting this morning. So I appreciate if you allow me to speak. So anyway, just have a quick question for Dr. Renaday. Just some clarification. I know very early on, when we first knew about COVID-19, etc., you had explained very definitively that it was not a virus, it was an infection as a result of the COVID-2. The SARS-CoV-2. So given that it's an infection and not a virus, I'm just wondering why you continue to refer to it as a virus. I was just confused about that.
Sure, Councillor. So, and you and I, we've had discussions about this, right? It is an infection that is caused by a virus. So the name that has been given to the set of symptoms that is as a result of the virus is COVID-19. The virus itself has been specifically named by the International Panel of Viral Namers as SARS-CoV-2. So there's a name of a virus and there's a name of the set of symptoms and the illness that the virus causes. It is definitive that the virus causes the illness. what's happening is that a lot of people are using the terms interchangeably. So either the name of the virus or the name of the symptoms that it causes. And I think it makes sense for purposes of discussing with most people to just consider them one and the same. So there's a virus. The virus causes a range of symptoms and disease. COVID-19 is the short form for all of that. So sometimes people are talking about the virus and sometimes they're talking about the disease and the symptoms.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions for Dr. Renaday? Warden Weber?
Thanks, your Chair Rombout. Just a little follow-up on Councillor Hand's question, and it dealt with, okay, so we made some changes, we closed some things down, and the numbers still went up. If we hadn't closed those things down, do we have a control on how much higher the numbers would have been? Because the numbers were probably effective at keeping them, but they still went up. So how do you get that? How do you measure what good the closing did when you don't know what it would have been if we'd have left it unchecked? Just a comment.
It's a very valid comment, Warden. It actually touches on one of the core challenges that public health always has, which is the description of what didn't happen because we intervened. And it's the same with viruses, right? Sorry, not viruses, vaccines. We know that vaccines have saved a lot of lives. It's a challenge to say specifically whose life has been saved or how, specifically how many, but there's estimates. And so have any of those estimates come out for these kinds of graded or staged interactions? I haven't seen them, but if I do, then I'll surely communicate that to the group, right? I think the idea really is that yes, each set of these interventions would have a graded effect. The more and more and more you layer, the more effect you can have. But I don't think anyone has parsed it down to, if we do this and not this, what's the impact going to be? Some of that might be found in models, but again, I've shared with you how vulnerable the models are to what assumptions you put in and what data you put into them. So no real word on that, but I think we can all kind of get behind the idea that if there are clear settings or characteristics of those settings, such as close contact, confinement, small spaces, crowded, etc., that when you can reduce people being in those settings, you will have an impact on disease, and then it just becomes a question of how much.
Any other questions for Dr. Renaday? Seeing none, I'll thank you again, Dr. Renaday, for your time this morning and for all that you're doing to help our community. We're still in the green, which is, I know we can't lean on that forever, but it is a good indication of how well the communities are working together to stop this.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are going to move on. Sorry. We're going to start with long-term care. We have one information report. We do need a motion to have that report received and filed. Moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor Stark. Any questions or comments about that report? Seeing none, all in favor of having that received and filed? Thank you. We're going to go to reports requiring a motion. The first one, A, is report dated November 18th, 2020 regarding Adult Enrichment Center Advisory Committee Annual Report 2019. We need a motion for that report. Moved by Councillor Arnold, seconded by Councillor Hand. Questions or comments about that report? And I believe there is a motion attached to that. All in favor of that motion? That is carried. And moving down to B, which is report dated November 18th, 2020 regarding Dementia House. We have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Moved by Warden Weber, seconded by Councillor Broad. Questions or comments about that report? I'm going to start with Councillor Stark.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to page 67 and page 69 of the report. Contained therein are estimates of deficits that relate to, I presume, the preferred models 2A and 2B that range in 2A anywhere from 535,000 in year 1 to 551,000 in year 5, and in model B, 2B, from 468 to 491,000. So to round them off, $500,000 per year in both instances. So my question is, I have three questions. One is, which is the preferred method, preferred model, and why? Two, do the deficit projections ultimately refer to future levy requirements from the county? And three, are there alternative operating funding prospects identified from the province? Thank you.
Ms. Joris, can I have you respond to that, please?
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair Rumbout. The preferred model is model 2B. It has to do with the space, the ability to provide flexible services, and it does have some lower operating costs than some of the others. The operating deficits are related to the levels of staff that would be required in the home, as well as some specialist kind of support that would be required. I think these may be estimated quite high, particularly related to the 4 hours of care announcements that the province has made. So there may be more operating funds available to us when this project is complete, although we don't really have information about what 4 hours of care means at this point. And we will be looking at how we could offset those costs, absolutely. But this sort of care does cost more operationally than the traditional long-term care models that we have right now. Did I miss a question?
Just as to the future funding and as it relates to the county levy.
Right. So I think that we can be assured that there is a realization in our country that there's some systemic problems with long-term care, and that particularly in Ontario, that we need to look at the funding models. I also think there's an opportunity between now and when we would move ahead with this to lobby the province for some funding for these sort of specialized services. But I cannot say, I cannot commit that they're willing to do that at this time.
Thank you. And that leads to another question, and that is on the lobbying side. I presume you would be looking for the county executives and the political executives to be carrying the ball in this regard. Is that correct?
Yes, as well as through our associations.
Good. Thank you very much, and thank you for the work that you're doing on this. This is vitally important, and I hope that Lambton County can be a leader in this. Thank you.
Just one comment about the lobbying as well, Jane. Would it be helpful to try to get a delegation at Roma with the warden, maybe the deputy warden, and yourself with the long-term care? Because I know the deadline is coming up.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. Initially, we had talked about the older A issue at Lambton Meadowview, the whole home. So we need to look at, should we be lobbying for this specific little piece of that? So absolutely.
So would you like a motion from this committee to submit a delegation request for Roma?
Yeah, or we can put one forward without a motion. It's
Okay,
okay either way, yeah.
okay, I didn't know. Okay, thank you. Other questions from the group? Councillor Bird, I'm going to allow one question today, okay?
Thank you. Thank you to the chair. I don't have a question, actually. It's just I wanted to make a comment upon this because this particular item is asking for a motion. I have a comment that I want to make about it. I really was quite alarmed to read about this proposal. And I'm sure I don't have to remind people, going back to May this year when we had the huge, devastating announcement from Premier Ford and about the GTA in Quebec and all the homes in that area, and how the Canadian Armed Forces were brought in, and all the reports that followed from that about all the things that needed to be done, and all the promises of commissions and all kinds of things. Well, if you followed the news yesterday, you'll already see that Premier Ford and the Minister of Long-Term Care have already backed away from the commitment. Nothing has been achieved yet, even though lots and lots of promises. So my point today is that I wanted to just be allowed to say that, first of all, $400,000 that you require for the to complete the planning and development part of the process is a lot of money. And I know that you also say in the report that the cost is likely to be offset by the increased funding from the Ministry of Long-Term Care, but you only say it's likely to be offset. It might not be. Now, this is a lot of money, and considering, going back to May, considering we've not yet fulfilled the commitment to fix everything with PSWs and everything else, if you have, whether this funding is covered or not, if you have $400,000 to put up front into this luxury project, then why do we not put that $400,000 into hiring a lot more full-time PSWs? I'm not asking a question, I'm just placing all my comments, because the $400,000 initially that you have to put in with this, then the 4.1 million and the 520,000 for the first year operations is an awful lot of money. And I come back to that if we have that money, we should be putting it in to fix up our current PSW problem. So once again, it might sound very lovely and everything else, but we have to fix our main priorities first before we go forward with these other luxurious capital projects. So thank you for allowing me to say that.
Okay, Councillor Arnold.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Jane for putting this report together. I thought it was really, really well done, and it gave me a lot of information. I thought it was great to look at a number of different options going forward, and I thought that the recommendations that you have here, Jane, were right on, because we need to continue moving down the road. And if we don't continue now, then we just get backtracked for, it could be a number of years before we get anything further. And I thought it was very, very positive that you're recommending that we put the capital funding in for discussion at our capital budget time. And, you know, and there's a lot of things that are going on in this field, but having known way too many people that have had dementia and the ramifications because of that, both to family and to our healthcare workers, I think this is a real positive step for all of us. I look forward to having this project completed eventually, and hopefully sooner than later. But I think your two recommendations that you have here for committee are bang on, because we need to keep moving ahead. And I think that as we debate this on the county floor, maybe at our next meeting or whatever, then hopefully the majority of council will agree that this is the right direction to go. So thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to make my comments, and I'm more than happy to move the recommendations if you're looking for a mover.
I believe we had a mover and a seconder for this at the beginning of the discussion, did we not? Thank you, though. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Arnold. Councillor Broad.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question for Jane. So Jane, we're looking at 10 beds here for this portion of it. How many beds are we really requiring in the county at the end of the day if we were to try to satisfy all the needs? I definitely don't view this as a luxury item. I'm not sure how we could call this a luxury, what we're trying to do here. But, how many beds are we looking at, Jane?
So I actually don't know the answer to that, but I will get it. But I can tell you that we have over 200 people on the wait list for Lambton Meadowview right now, and more than that for Marshall Gowland Manor, and 65 at Northampton Lodge.
Wow.
Some of those people, though, may be on more than one list, so you can't just add up that number of people, but there's no question that we can use more beds.
Thank you, and I do appreciate your report there. I look forward to bringing this to fruition. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you for that comment, Councillor Broad, and I believe that our aging population is increasing as we move along, and we're already behind the 8 ball as far as the number of beds that are needed. Councillor Loosely.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Roundboats. I just want to echo some of the statements that have been made. I also think this is a very important project to this county, and I support it completely. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments on that, I will call the vote. All in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Thank you so much. And is there any new business to be brought forward for this committee? Seeing none, thank you for your time, Jane, and please extend our appreciation to the rest of your staff as well for all they're doing. All right, we are going to move on to Corporate Services Division. There is one information report in Corporate Services Division. We need a motion to receive and file that report. Moved by Councillor Arnold, seconded by Councillor Hand. Any questions or comments about that report? All in favor? That is carried. We have one report requiring a motion. We need a mover and a seconder to discuss that. Moved by Warden Weber, seconded by Councillor Stark. Questions or comments about that report? All in favor? That is carried. Is there any other business for corporate services? They are getting off easy today. All right, we will go to Finance, Facilities, and Court Services Division. There are several information reports in this area. Do we want to, Councillor Arnold, do you want to have all 3 of those included in that? Thank you. And Councillor Broad, you're going to second that. Any questions or comments or highlights for those reports? All in favor? Those are carried. Is there any other business for that, for Finance, Facilities, and Court Services today? Seeing none, we're going to let you off the hook as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go right to Social Services Division. There are several information reports in that division as well. We need a mover and a seconder to receive and file those. Councillor Cook and Deputy Warden, just to confirm, we are going to do all of those reports together. Thank you. And any questions or comments about any of those reports? All in favor of receiving and filing? That is carried. Thank you. We have 2 motions requiring a report or requiring a motion. The first one is report dated November 18th, 2020 regarding homelessness prevention team staffing. We need a motion to discuss that report.
So move.
Thank you, Councillor Bouchy. Seconded by Councillor Cook. Any questions or comments about that? Councillor Stark and then Councillor Arnold.
With respect to the increase in the staffing, I wondered, would those potential increases be permanent staff, or would we be hiring them on a contract basis, or how would we administer the potential additions? My sense is that, and I'll make this comment, once you add staff, it's very difficult to reduce staff. So would it be a preferred option to look at not a temporary, but a contract basis first, leading to permanent if that's appropriate?
Ms. Calasanti, would you like to comment on that?
Certainly. Through you, Chair Rumboats, to Councillor Stark. Thank you for your question. If in our information reports, there was a report regarding the Social Service Relief Fund, and we have hired some contract community support workers under that program to deal with our overflow shelter and the increasing number of homeless individuals in the community. The permanent staff that we're looking to is for our Reaching Home funding. Through the federal government, we received an additional base dollars, just over $500,000 a year, to work with the homeless population that existed before COVID. So you might recall before COVID, we were averaging about 60 individuals who presented as homeless in our county. And it's to work with those individuals to assist them in finding permanent housing, to assist them in providing the supports they need to remain housed, as well as to make sure they're connected to those appropriate supports. One of the individuals we're looking to hire is someone to work with those with an Indigenous background. Our enumeration found that we had a higher number of individuals with an Indigenous background who were experiencing homelessness. And it takes quite some time to build those relationships so that we can start to place them. So our dollars are base funding through the federal government as well as the provincial government. So we did want to move forward with hiring on a permanent basis because we believe we will need those individuals for at least another 3 or 4 years. After that, perhaps we will have started to really reduce those numbers and we can revisit it. But that was sort of what our plan was through the report.
Thank you.
Okay. And who is next? Thank you, Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I know in the past, any outside agency funding, such as the federal, provincial government, there's always a caveat for us that if the funding disappears, then we do a reevaluation and it's not an automatic keep them on. And I didn't notice that in the report, Valerie. I may have missed it, but that's normally what we've done from a long-standing recommendation and past motion of council. I just want to confirm that that would still maintain here. Much in all, I think these are 3 valuable positions, of course, but just ensure that it comes back to county council so there's a conscious decision if the funding ever disappears off our base and the provincial side.
Certainly, again, through you, Chair Rumboats, to Councillor Arnold, with the funding as part of the Reaching Home, and certainly with most of our funding, we have to do a new community plan every year. As part of that community plan, we look at what our resources are. So our hope is, again, down the road, as our numbers start to decrease of those people experiencing homelessness, we might be able to move those dollars elsewhere. We might be able to channel them to a different agency wherever we see a gap. So we'll be reviewing every year where those dollars are going and making sure that they're going where they're needed the most. So certainly, if those dollars were to end, yes, we'd have to revisit that at that time, but we'll be doing it on an annual basis as well.
Okay, Councillor Hand, you are muted.
Sorry, I have a question, Mrs. Colasanti. And maybe it's not appropriate in this part, but when we were talking about staffing, you and I have had conversations recently about the number of people in the local hotels and issues that's causing on the municipality. So part of this additional staffing also helps with finding better solutions to house people on a more permanent basis. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that is correct. And
so that we can reduce the number in the hotels, which is, again, we're having some very negative impacts, which not the people's fault, but it's just the circumstances on our municipal resources. So we're hoping that they get the permanent housing and then we can wean out the other program eventually.
That's correct. We're hoping to place, our focus is on the overflow hotels right now, and we're hoping to move those individuals along, as well as, while we have some additional staff, we'll be able to provide more supports in the overflow hotels. And we're working very closely with public health to expand our outreach team to be able to be at the outreach hotels a little more often. And we're also partnering with some of our community agencies like Canadian Mental Health Association. So you should start to see more supports coming soon.
Yeah, that's great, because I just think there was maybe not an awareness of some of the situations that were happening. So now if there's more oversight, people will see before it gets to, be more impactful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Thank you. And the next report is dated November 18th, 2020 regarding the affordable housing development. We need a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Moved by Warden Weber, seconded by Councillor Stark. Thank you. Any questions or concerns about that? Councillor Stark?
Yes, in the recommendations, it talks about looking to secure land or opportunities within Sarnia and Point Edward. My specific question is, and whether or not it's appropriate for here in camera, I'll ask the question and then you, Chair, can direct me if I'm incorrect in this. Has consideration been given to the back campus of the former Skits school as an option for a Sarnia location? And secondly, what criteria? There are properties owned by the city of Sarnia and I presume the village of Point Edward that are owned municipally. Are they being investigated as options for potential construction of this very appropriate facility? And I would also note that the town of Aylmer just opened a 12-unit facility like the one that is being suggested here. And they are actually planning a twin facility like that. So it clearly is an option that we should be looking at, I presume, if we have the land available. So my first question is, are we looking at all of the municipally owned properties? And failing that, are we investigating the publicly owned properties that currently exist at the former Skits property? Thank you.
For you, Chair Roundboats, to
Yes,
Councillor Stark. This motion would give us that approval to go forward and start to do that exploration. Until now, we wanted to certainly see if council was supportive of this. So we would now start to look at all of those various properties. And yes, there certainly are some criteria, and it's quite lengthy. Are they located to amenities on the bus route, those types of things. But once this is approved, we would be able to start to have those conversations.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Cook and then Councillor Arnold.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just through to Valerie, I full-heartedly approve the project going forward. If it's anywhere close to what the project happened in Forest, where you did that one a few years ago, great success. I can vote for it because I see it every day when I go to work. If this is anywhere reasonably close to that expectation, I think this is going to be another excellent project to go forward. And just to Councillor Stark's comment, I think looking at public land is probably the most prudent thing to do. I agree. If we can get a reduced cost, it would help the builder get started and get the foot uptake with the builder. So I think if we could look at that, that'd be an excellent way to do it too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment in regards to the affordable housing development, and that is the size of the units. And I know that we've had people approach us around tiny homes, whether these would be individual or I know it talked about a modular facility. And just to ensure that they're going to be homes that are, have lots of dignity, and I'm sure they will be, and that they will be of a substantial enough size to support a person or two in a one bedroom, of course. And just to make sure that that is factored into everything, because when I looked at the dollar value versus the 18 to 24, it starts to shrink tremendously how much per unit those pieces are going to cost. So just want to make sure that we'll undertake to have good sizes and well-appointed places.
Thank you, Councillor. Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that yes, absolutely, we'll be taking that into consideration. And we are definitely looking at modular housing, and they come in very specific sizes. So they are larger than what you would consider a tiny home. They would be similar to a one-bedroom unit that we've built in the past.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boucher.
At one time, the county was involved in skits to big time. Then we withdrew from it altogether. Are you suggesting that you might be still considering it?
Through you, Chair Rumboats, to Councillor Bushy. I think it's too soon to know that. What this motion would allow us is to start to explore property within those communities to see what is available. So we don't have any predetermined ideas of land that might be out there, but we're going to start to take a look at anything that might be available, correctly zoned in the right areas. Those types of things would have to come into consideration.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Thank you so much. Anything else for other business? Okay, then we will need a motion to go into camera to discuss a report on labor negotiations between the Corporation of the County of Lambton and Uniform Local 302 pursuant of sections 239 of the Municipal Act. Moved by Councillor Broad, seconded by Councillor Hand. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So for those of you watching on YouTube, we will be returning to open session, but only to adjourn. So we appreciate you joining us today. Have a good day.